This is the Patriots Catch-22 podcast with Evan Lazar and Alex Barth.
I'm Evan Lazar. Evan Lazar.
Hello, everybody.
Nailed it. Joined as always by our Barth. That's a fit. That's a match. No risk it, no biscuit.
22.
Here is Evan Lazar and Alex Barth.
I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm so 50-50 on that one. That was the hardest choice I made. Anthony Jennings, Mack Wilson. Which guy is it? But
That's the hardest choice.
Of all the stuff on the roster projection, yeah, that was the toughest one.
Okay.
What was tougher for you?
The whole roster.
Well, okay. All right.
I'm just messing with
Go
you.
watch Xavier Worthy.
We do take a lot of pride in arguing about Anthony Jennings versus Mack Wilson.
Apparently. I'm still mad you haven't watched. I'm mad you still haven't watched Xavier Worthy.
No, I haven't. But also be careful about what you say about Mack Wilson because he's on the Twitter hunt. You see that lately? He's been tweeting a lot.
He always tweets a lot. He's
I
a
like
good
Mack
follow.
Wilson.
Yeah, he's a good follow. I
Yeah,
saw it.
enjoy it.
So somebody tweeted at him that they'd bought his jersey. And they were like, lifelong fan, like, glad, like, time to prove the haters wrong.
Yeah.
And he tweeted back and he goes, like, thanks, but I might get a new number. But don't worry, if I get a new number, I'll buy you a new jersey.
Oh,
like,
nice.
That's awesome. That's the guy that gets
Yeah,
it.
I'm not I'm not a big jersey number guy, you know that. But 30 on a linebacker is not my favorite.
That's fair.
I feel like linebackers. I want my linebackers in the 50s. 50, 51, 54.
Some guys
obviously.
pull off the 90s numbers, too.
I feel like 90s is more like an edge, though. Like, I'm more thinking outside
Oh, like,
linebacker.
okay, yeah, middle
Like
linebacker.
I know that, 54 has got its lineage here, but
Yeah.
like 54 is the inside linebacker number to me. Like, that's the
50,
number.
52, 54.
Or 51, I think, is good, too.
Yeah. But
But you're
yeah,
on
no,
Mayo,
yeah,
51.
there's not that many, like, inside linebackers. I'm like, was it Peter Bulware that wore 91, or?
Was it?
I think so. And he played, like, next to Ray Lewis in the middle.
Huh.
That's I think the one
that's a
I'm
deep
thinking
cut.
of, but I know it is.
Anyways.
And he was 58, so whatever.
Alex and I will be with you for the next couple of hours. We do also have something on the docket for next week that we're looking forward to that we are going to put out. I'm going on vacay, Alex, going on vacation for next week and going to take a week off before the calm before the storm, which means that they'll sign DeAndre Hopkins and Dalvin Cook while I'm on Martha's Vineyard, and the whole world will turn upside down. But regardless, we're going to have something for you next week at our usual time, so don't think that we're blowing you off a week before training camp. So be on the lookout for that. But today we're going to really get into sort of the meat and potatoes of our training camp preview, just since I won't be here next week. So here's the big part of the show will be we're going to go position by position again, but instead of going throughout the whole roster and talking like we did the roster projection show, we're going to change it up a little bit and do one big thing at each position group. It can be a position battle, like, training camp battle. It can be an individual player. It can be whatever we want to do, we can do with that. And we'll also talk a little bit about what's going on in the news. Not much going on in the news, but
No.
I do want to get our evolving weekly. We have to have a weekly DeAndre Hopkins check-in. Like, you have
Pretty
to,
much.
you have to know where you're at weekly at this point with that one. So let's just get that out of the way really quickly, and then we'll get in to the camp preview. And you can call in 855 Pats 500, email in at webradio@patriots.com, and we can weigh in on anything that you want to weigh in on there as well. But with DeAndre Hopkins, Alex, the more that this plays out, the more I am concerned that the Patriots are essentially, I wouldn't even call it leverage. I would call a fallback plan for DeAndre Hopkins, where if it had to come down to the Patriots or the Titans, I think he's coming to New England. But the team that I continue to just be afraid of is Kansas City. If they get that Chris Jones contract extension done, they get some money, maybe they convert some salaries to signing bonuses and things like that to get further under the cap. That seems like a great situation for him to play off of Travis Kelce, and they could use it. I think last year Mahomes' magic kind of put them over the top without Tyreek Hill. But maybe that seeps in a little bit more for them 2 years removed from trading Tyreek Hill, that they don't really have that other guy besides Kelce. So I think that they're a team that's lurking. Obviously, Buffalo, some of the rumors out there that they would take him at a discount, like a ring-chasing type contract. He kind of called them out, though, and said
He said he's not doing that.
He's not doing that. So we'll see. But where's your meter at right now? What's your check-in on DeAndre Hopkins?
I still think if things stay the way they currently are, which isn't going to happen, it's the NFL, things happen.
Yeah.
But if things stay the way they currently are, I think he signs with Patriots. but that means the Chiefs don't open up more money. That
Right.
means nobody gets hurt. That means, on and on and on. And there was that report last week from Mike Reese that the Titans were being more aggressive and the Patriots kind of, they had their meeting and went from there. And a lot of people interpreted that as the Titans offered more money. I actually interpreted it a little differently. I read that as the Titans made their offer and since have been saying, come on, man, looking forward to hearing from you. What do you got? You made up your mind, like they're badgering him. Whereas the Patriots, they put their offer on the table. They said, this is it.
Yeah.
Let us know. Call us. We'll be here. And people may hear that and think of it as the Patriots being lazy. I don't think it is. Everybody's different. Some people don't like, he may have made it clear to them, I want to make my decision. I don't want to hear from you. Some people just operate that way.
Right.
Maybe he didn't, and maybe this is just how they do business. Just, this is our offer, take it or leave it. But it does feel like they are kind of sitting back and letting everything else develop. And I've said this before. I think they got to be aggressive if they really want to get this guy. I don't think this is a situation where you can just sit back and let the cards fall. Now, maybe if the circumstances seriously change, maybe if the Chiefs open up the money or somebody gets hurt, then they go and they say, all right, we realize your market's changed and we're going to adjust our offer accordingly. But again, I think right now, if he had to decide today, he's a Patriot. But he doesn't have to decide today, and there's still a lot of time for things to change.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. I always look at the Patriots with contract negotiations, and I'm not saying that it's necessarily a perfect approach because it has, I think it's cost them players, and I think it's also gotten them players, right? I think it's gone both ways over the years. But they're one of those teams that puts an offer out early, puts out an inquiry early. Sometimes it's not even a formal offer, just kind of floats their interest early. And then maybe late in the process, it's one last phone call, right? Of what's the number? What are you thinking? And that's what my point is, I guess, is that the Patriots' most aggressive offer is never their first offer, right? They're not one of those teams that typically, now there's some exceptions. I think like Stephon Gilmore might have been an exception where they just immediately put the Brinks truck in the parking lot and said, here you go, right? But I think that for the most part, they're a team that tends to lurk more than they pounce. And late in the process, maybe they get to the point where they say, all right, now we're gonna offer you the big deal, or now we're gonna show some legitimate aggressiveness or interest in the player. And I don't think DeAndre Hopkins is all that different. So that's where things stand now. Turning the page to our training camp preview here a little bit. We're going to operate under the assumption offensively and at wide receiver, when we get to wide receiver specifically, that DeAndre Hopkins is not a Patriot. Until he's a Patriot, he's not a Patriot, right? So just putting that caveat aside, I do want to start with the quarterbacks. I think the biggest thing from a training camp perspective, we've talked about how you're not really going to learn what we need to learn about the quarterbacks and about Mac Jones in August. Like, this is more a conversation for like January. But in terms of what we've seen so far, I'm not expecting, and we're not expecting, I think I can speak for you on this, that to see a quarterback competition in 2 weeks. Like, I don't think we're going to be seeing what we saw a couple years ago with Cam Newton and Mac, or Cam Newton and Jared Stidham and Brian Hoyer in the 2020 season. I don't think we're going to get into that sort of thing this offseason, which I do believe, and I'm on the record with saying is a good thing. I think it's a waste of time. I don't think that it's really something that benefits anybody. If the two players were, if I really thought Bailey Zappi was like a potential long-term answer, then maybe when it was like Cam Newton versus Mac, like totally different scenario, right?
Right.
This is, I feel like the best thing, interest of the team is to go all in one more year with Mac and see where you come out with it. I know that they were teasing me on Unfiltered about seeing Mac yesterday and chatting with him really quickly, but the one thing that, I'm not going to tell the story again, but the one thing that I'll take away from that, he does look good, Alex. Do you like hearing that? He does look good.
Yeah.
He looks swole. He looks a little thick.
Well, it's almost best shape of his life season, so.
I'm not going to say best shape of his life because I don't know the best shape he's been in his life. I don't know if he would agree with that statement. I also don't know, I don't know how much it means, probably nothing. But what I will say is that he looks ripped. Like, he looks like he's in good shape. He looks like he's ready to go. He sounds like he's ready to go. So I think that the quarterback's in a good mindset right now, and we'll see what happens. But my big thing with the quarterbacks remains consistent, and that is you don't necessarily. I'm not at contract stage yet. I know the 5th-year option's coming up next offseason. They do have some sort of deadline to make a contract decision. What I'm more interested in is Mac a truck or is he a trailer? Like, is he somebody that can put the team on his back? Is he somebody that can lead them to wins? Or is he somebody that they're simply going to win with? And if they're going to only win with him, I'm not as against that as I think some other people are. Like, to some people, and I'm just generalizing, you either have Patrick Mahomes or you don't. You either have Tom Brady or you don't. And everybody, it's like Patrick Mahomes, it's Joe Burrow, and maybe for some people, not you, but for some people it's Josh Allen, and then like everybody else just stinks, right? Like that's how some people operate. I'm not like that. I do think that you can win with more of like a serviceable, average game manager, whatever name you want to put on it, type of quarterback. But again, if they pick that road, then they need to reflect that in the way that they build up the rest of the roster around him. They can't keep doing the same things that they did with Brady if they don't have an elite level quarterback. I'm not ruling out a leap for Mac Jones. I don't think it's going to be a leap into elite status, but I'm not ruling out a significantly better season from Mac Jones than maybe even his rookie year in terms of aesthetic. Like, I don't know if the statistics will be a lot better than his rookie year, but like how it looks and how it feels, I think that we could be having a much different conversation in 6 months.
Yeah, I mean, I think he can be better than he was as a rookie. Absolutely. I agree with a lot of what you said. You know, we're not going to get the real answer on him until at least Thanksgiving. None of that's happening in camp. The one thing I'll be looking for Mac Jones in camp specifically is how comfortable does he look in the pocket? Because last year, the first inclination that something was wrong was he was sped up. And I feel like I give this explanation a lot, but I think it's really important for people to understand this. What sped up means, and every quarterback in their career has gotten sped up to some extent. Tom Brady would get sped up from time to time. What sped up means is, for an example, on a given play, okay, I need 3 seconds to get, like, the route, it's going to take 3 seconds to develop. I have 3 seconds to get this ball out, and, you're going to have the 3 seconds. Now, if all of a sudden you start getting hit at 2.5, 2.6 seconds, then all of a sudden your internal timing's thrown off, and then you start rushing things, because even then when you have the time, you don't know if you do. And Mac, behind that offensive line last year, and in an offense where the route patterns didn't match up with what he was being asked to do, and they didn't match up with each other, the timing was all off, and he got sped up. And they were never able to reset his internal clock.
Yeah.
And everything snowballed from there. So, and look, sometimes, like I said, Tom Brady would get sped up in individual games here and there, and he was very good about, all right, I'm just going to, I got to calm down, reset, and they'll figure it out. Now, he also played behind much better offensive lines than what Mac Jones might play behind this year, especially at the tackle position. But some quarterbacks get sped up and they recover. Some quarterbacks get sped up and they never recover. That's what happened to Josh Rosen. Josh Rosen played behind the worst offensive line the NFL has seen in the last 10 years, and he was panicky the rest of his career in the pocket. He never got over that. I'm not saying Mac Jones is going to be Josh Rosen, because I don't think he ever got sped up to that extent, but the biggest thing for me in camp is, does he look comfortable in the pocket? Does he look confident in the pocket? Is he stepping into throws? Is he rushing throws? All of that. Was he able to kind of reset himself mentally from where he was at last year dealing with that pass rush? Now, I think O'Brien's offense is really going to help because it's a quick release offense. He's not going to have as many instances where he's sitting back in the pocket for 3.5, 4 seconds. It's going to be more 2.5 concepts. But, again, we're not going to get the big picture answer on Mac Jones that everybody wants and that 5th-year option. We can't even start talking about that until like Thanksgiving. But that's going to be the first inclination again, is how comfortable does he look in the pocket?
Yeah, it's a great point, and I think that it goes back to what I always think about it with any player, but with quarterbacks especially. What is Mac Jones's carrying trait? Like, what is his best attributes that allow him to, whatever level of quarterback you think he was a couple years ago, but like just be in the NFL, like just be a starting quarterback in the NFL.
It's his accuracy and especially his intermediate accuracy and his football IQ. And I think the offense he was in for the majority of last year minimized those traits. And that's why a lot of people are sitting here saying, well, what exactly is it that Mac Jones does best? It's hard to tell because last year the things he does best weren't put on display.
Right. And that's, if he can get back to being that smart, instinctive, quick decision-making, accurate thrower that he was at Alabama and that he was in his rookie season with the Patriots, then I think their offense it will be fine. I definitely still have question marks about his ceiling as a quarterback in this league. You know, what are
that's fair.
What are his physical ceilings? You know, what is his ability to create out of structure is a big one, obviously, nowadays with all these mobile and athletic quarterbacks playing the position, but also just his ability to put the team on his back in the clutch moments and some of those intangible type of things. Like, I'm not a big clutch guy, like I take, which is kind of hard to believe when you watch Tom Brady for 20 years, but I still.
Well, is it possible that you take it for granted?
No, I just think that like when you say like a quarterback like Brady's clutch, what you're just really saying is that Tom Brady's really freaking good. Right, so like,
I think there's something to be said that some players struggle in big moments.
I guess, but if you look at like the leaders in fourth quarter comebacks and game-winning drives,
right?
It's just the greatest quarterbacks of all time.
Okay, the problem is,
so like Tom Brady and Peyton Manning are 1 and 2.
But I would
fourth
say
quarter comebacks, like shocker.
I would say the fourth quarter comeback, and this is a completely different conversation, but the fourth quarter comeback stat itself is flawed, not the concept of clutch, because if you get the ball at the start of the third quarter down 2, towards the end of the third quarter down 2, start driving down the field, get in a field goal range, third quarter ends, first play of the fourth quarter, you kick a field goal.
Yeah.
And then you put up, and then, next defense possession, you get a pick 6. Now you're up 2 scores, you coast the rest of the way. That's a fourth quarter comeback.
No, yeah, I know. There's some subjectivity to
the stats.
Sure.
I would say that clutch is an unmeasurable. Clutch, it's just an unmeasurable. That's what it is.
That's fine. I just, again, I feel like the quarterbacks that win playoff games and that are clutch tend to just be the good quarterbacks, but that's besides the point. It's a semantics argument.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest thing with Mac is, he has to get back to those carrying traits. Like, that's what makes you great. And I think last year at times, a lot of it was what they were asking him to do, like you laid out. It felt like he was trying too hard to like be a playmaker back there and make things happen. And when he's at his best, it's in rhythm, it's in sync, and it just he's just distributing the ball so that it just happens on it naturally, right? It's not forced. Like when you watch Mac at Alabama, and I know it's a different game and you play with all these receivers, yada, yada, yada. We all know. But when you watch him at Alabama, it never looked hard. Right.
No.
It never looked hard. It never looked like he was forcing the issue. It never looked like he had to pull something out of his back pocket or anything like that. And that's when I'm going to know that Mac is back on the right track, is when last year it looked hard for him. It looked overwhelming. He looked overwhelmed. Yeah. He was frustrated. It showed visibly, but it also showed on the film. Like at what point it needs to look easy for him again. And he's that type of guy. He's not. I think sometimes that it looks hard for Josh Allen to play quarterback, but he's just so physically gifted that it doesn't matter a lot of the time, right? Yeah. He just overcomes it. I think Mac Jones is a natural quarterback that just needs to make it look easy. And we'll see if he can get back to that. And the last thing, you mentioned pressure, you mentioned patience in the pocket. A lot of that comes from knowing where your answers are, right? And I think that's where it comes back to coordination too. Like if they have this blitz on, like how are we sliding the protection? How are we picking it up? Where's the hot route? Where's the distribution? Like where am I getting the football out to? Like those types of things are really, really key. We got a cool email. I want to read an email right off the top. This is from Jeremiah, who is one of the lucky 30 kids that got to catch passes from Mac Jones yesterday.
Okay.
At his clinic here at Gillette Stadium from the YMCA. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on where the YMCA was located, but he's actually a big fan of the show, apparently.
Oh, nice.
And he emailed it, and he said, yesterday I was fortunate enough to catch passes from Mac, and from first-hand point of view, he did have a first-hand point of view, it felt like he had some good velocity on the ball.
All right.
So the other throw that Phil Perry posted on Twitter, it wasn't 70 yards in the air. Okay, that football field is in the full 100. That aside, it was probably like 60, right? Like 50 to 60 yards in the air. I'm terrible at that. Like the landmarks and stuff, I'm terrible at it. I need rulers. Anyways, I was standing on the far end of the end zone, from where he was throwing the football. You can actually see me in my gray polo off to the side if you look really closely. So I was standing in the far side of the field from where he was throwing that ball, and you could hear it. You could hear it. Like you could hear the whizzing, right, of the ball going through the air. And I actually said to one of our social guys that was standing next to me, I said that, the ball, that's got some zip on it. Like these are some fastballs. He wasn't like going easy on these kids. He was throwing some real darts out there. I do think he looks a little bit stronger. I do think the ball's coming out well. I think his mechanics look good. Now, granted, this was against air with absolutely no competition on the field whatsoever. But that's what it comes down to for Mac is even last year, even with as big of a disaster as it was around him last year, his kept clean numbers were still good. He graded out well when he was kept clean. His passer rating was over 100 when he was kept clean in the pocket. We know that he can throw. He can go out there and sling it like that all day long. He can do it. The question is going to ultimately be, can he do it under pressure? Can he do it under duress? Can he do it from a muddied pocket when he can't step into it and really put his weight behind the football and he has to just kind of flick the wrist? Like, can he get it there? Like, those are the things that are going to be the big thing. But Jeremiah, you're 100% right. That ball had some heat on it yesterday.
But the other thing is,
fun.
Remember everybody called it a catchable ball, like when he came out, all the receivers, all the Patriots receivers. The kid caught that pass.
Oh, yeah.
That's impressive.
It was a great catch.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
My first, because obviously I wasn't like really thinking of football implications of Mac Jones throwing passes to teenagers.
Right.
So I wasn't standing there grading the throws or anything, but it was a hell of a catch. I don't think I could have caught that, honestly. I'm going to be honest about it. I don't think I would have caught it. It had zip and it was deep. We're talking about 50 yards. I think it was probably, if I'm going to be generous, I might say it was like 55 to 60. I'm going to say it was probably like 50 to 55. But regardless, it was a good throw. Let's move on to running backs here, and then we'll take some of these calls after that. So with running backs, I think we didn't really do the one big thing. I'm going to tee that up better this time.
Yeah.
My one big thing with running backs is Pierre Strong. I'm going to continue hammering the table for Pierre Strong. Look, I'm a sucker for big plays. I'm a sucker for explosive offense. And there just aren't that many guys on this roster that have that big play capability outside of Pierre Strong and probably Tyquan Thornton, right? Like, those are the two guys that can really bring that speed element. If I'm Bill O'Brien, other than Ramondre Stevenson, of course, I'm trying to find ways to get Pierre Strong the football in space. And it's not that complicated. Like, we're not putting too much on his play. Just throw him a screen here or there, hand the ball off to him in some sub-package looks where there's some space to run. Maybe hit him on a swing pass coming out of the backfield every once in a while. Let's just see what Pierre Strong can do with the football in his hands. And I would also say that being my one big thing at running back is also tied to some of the free agent running backs that are available that we've talked about a lot. Dalvin Cook, Zeke Elliott, Leonard Fournette. If it's not coming together for Pierre Strong, and it doesn't look like he's going to be somebody that you can count on in year two, if some of those guys are unsigned mid-August, going into that big like 10-day layoff between the third preseason game and the first regular season game and the opener against the Eagles, and you're not really feeling great about Pierre Strong and Kevin Harris, then maybe it's time to call Zeke, right? Like, maybe that's when you make one of those phone calls. So it's twofold. One, I think that he is a legitimate big play weapon that they should get involved and see, even if it's just 4 or 5 times a game, just to try to get him a touch and get him out in the open field. I'd love to see that. But you also have to see something from him to be able to put some pressure or to be able to back up Ramondre Stevenson and be able to avoid having to go into the free agent market. Because I do think we could wake up in 6 weeks and they might be signing a running back because they don't feel great about it.
So I'm actually going to take a step further back than where you're at. My big thing is just, what is Ramondre Stevenson's role?
Yeah.
What do we think and some of this goes into preseason as well, but I've said this a lot. They overworked him last year. They overworked him, and he cannot be, I don't think any running back in the modern game outside of maybe Derrick Henry, and even you start to see with him at the end of the year, I don't think any running back in the modern game could be like a 350 touch player. It's just the game's too physical now.
He was at like 280 last year, I think it was.
Was it 280 or was that carries?
He was pretty high up there in touches
he was
last year.
He was fifth in the league in touches last year in the regular season, which is, look, somebody's got to be fifth, obviously, but you look at the teams that were ahead of the Patriots there, it's not sustainable. 280 touches last year. Did I say 350? I meant 250. You certainly can't be a 350 touch guy.
I think I nailed that. 280.
279.
Did I say 279?
Yeah.
Oh.
I was like 2 snaps off on Anthony Jennings last week, and you got on me for it. So, no, it is 279. You said 280.
Oh.
Yeah.
I'm giving it to myself.
I'm not.
I'm
anyway,
giving it to me.
He needs less of a role. And that's not me saying he's bad. I think he's a great player, but it's more of a quality over quantity thing. I actually think if you take some of the lesser impact snaps off his plate, he's going to give you more in the big moments. Late in the year last year, after that Cincinnati game where he fumbled late in the game, he admitted that he was kind of
it was obvious.
Banged up. It was getting to him.
Yeah, it was all over his face.
That's what I mean by it's not that I think he's bad. I want him on the field, but I want him on the field at his best. And I remember there was a game last year. I don't remember which game it was, but they were up like 2 scores late in the game with like a minute and a half to go, and they were still giving the ball to Stevenson to run out the clock. And it was like, he doesn't need to be in the game right now.
Yeah.
You Kevin Harris, Pierre Strong, somebody.
I think it was Detroit. I don't think they had another running back.
I think it was Detroit. You're right.
They didn't have another back.
So, okay, that brings me back to my point. Like, what is his – where are they taking those snaps away from? Is he going to be the primary early down back?
And then
it's Pierre Strong or Ty Montgomery on third down? Is he going to be in that James White role and it's Kevin Harris, or maybe they sign somebody?
Yeah.
Or maybe it is Pierre Strong as a change of pace back and the early down back? Or do they just take half of each? Remember, this is what it looked like they were going to do last year before Ty Montgomery got hurt. It looked like they were going to go away from the early down, passing down back layout and basically, all right, this is a Ramondre drive.
Right.
This is a Ty Montgomery drive. This is a Damian Harris drive. I actually like that setup better. Now, it's really hard to do.
If you like that setup better, then you should want Dalvin Cook in this building.
I never said I don't want Dalvin Cook. I would just rather have DeAndre Hopkins.
Me too. But I'm just saying, like I said this.
Well, what about Leonard Fournette?
If you're not going to get DeAndre Hopkins, we're operating on that assumption. Like, wouldn't you then just turn to say, let's just go all in?
Then
on this,
I
right?
guess. Yeah. Well, I would almost go off for Marcus Peters some money, but at that point,
I don't think that they will.
I don't think they will
He's
either.
Not their
but
type.
The point going back to the point, but Leonard Fournette could do this too if they don't get Cook, right? But it was like, all right, this is a Ramondre drive all the way through, whatever the situation. This is a Ty Montgomery drive all the way through. This is a Damian Harris drive all the way through. I wouldn't hate them going back to that format either. But before we can get into, is Pierre Strong the guy to replace James White? Is Kevin Harris ready to take on a more regular early down back role? And those are all good questions that we'll start answering as well. That's a big position battle, essentially the second running back. But we don't know what the second running back's duties are going to be because there was no second running back last year.
That's a fair point.
Right? So let's figure out what Ramondre Stevenson's doing. And then when we find out, all right, here's what Ramondre's doing, here's what the other guy's doing, then we can look at it and say, okay, here's
the best one for this
right, here's
job.
what the responsibility is for RB2, who fits it best. Because Strong, Harris, and Montgomery are all very different players.
Yeah.
They all bring very different things to the table. So that is the thing about Pierre Strong. I'm not saying you're wrong, but I think to know what the running back position is going to be, it all starts with Ramondre Stevenson. We need to know what his role is going to be, and then we go from there.
So I want to spin this forward, and I'm sorry to the calls, but we're like on a roll here, and I want to get this out first. We're going to get to you in a second, I promise. I want to talk about tight ends for a second, because to me, this I think is like the biggest X factor of this team offensively, assuming, again, no Hopkins, no external ad, right? I think the biggest X factor for this team right now is Hunter Henry and Mike Gesicki coexisting and being a better duo than Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry. Because if this tight end duo can really be a factor this year, I think it helps the team in two ways. One, obviously it helps the team because those guys are going to be productive, and that just inherently helps the team that on an individual level that they're going to be productive. But I think the other thing that it really helps the team with is they become one of those 12 personnel offenses that is really multiple. And now what you can really do is you have an answer to whatever test the defense throws out on the field against you. When I'm talking more personnel wise than schematically, actual play design. Personnel wise, if defenses match their 12 personnel with standard nickel, that means that somebody's getting a linebacker in coverage, right? It just by the sheer numbers of it, somebody's getting a linebacker. in coverage, whether it's Gesicki or Henry or Ramondre, right, or one of the running backs, Juju in the slot. Like, somebody's facing a linebacker in coverage, advantage Patriots. Now, if they put dime defense out there, then now you have 2 tight ends, and let's just say for argument's sake right now it's Ramondre. Well, now you can go under center and you can run the football down their throats, right? You got 6 DBs on the field. We have 2 tight ends. We got this workhorse back in Ramondre who's 220 pounds. Here it comes at you. Stop it. So I think that in order for that to happen, though, they have to be really productive passing the football out of 12 personnel. Like that has to be a carrying trait for the offense, right? They have to be able to say, we can threaten out of this grouping in the passing game. And if they can do that, then they might be able to force teams, either they're just going to be better, right, and they're going to move the ball through the air, or they might be able to force teams to play lighter defense, which is going to allow them to run the football. Right. So I think that's why 12 personnel, and this is something that Bill O'Brien is fantastic at. He's really good at using indicators and using formations to threaten defense. He loves empty, right? We've talked about that a ton.
Well, that's why Ty Montgomery's so interesting, to just add on to what you're saying.
Because he can play running back and he can play wide receiver. So they theoretically, and I think Ramondre could do it too because he's so talented. So I think he could do it too. Theoretically, they can be an under center 12 personnel offense and an empty 12 personnel offense at the same time.
Right.
And then you get into some of the things that they used to do with vintage O'Brien, like 2011 Patriots. Pace, empty, no huddle, right? Like, and then all of a sudden you get, let's say they get week 1 against Philly, and they really like running the football against Philly's dime package. Like, they think that's a true advantage for them. If you can get their dime package on the field against your 12 personnel, well, now you go no huddle, and now they can't substitute, and now you get them stuck in these personnel groupings. This is what the Patriots used to do when they were humming, like when they were at their best. The other thing that they would really do a lot of is use it to their advantage for coverage indicators. If you put Ramondre Stevenson out on the boundary, and he's technically your outside receiver, if he gets followed by a linebacker outside, what is it? It's man coverage. Linebacker's not playing the deep third in zone coverage, right? It's man. If he gets followed by a corner, or a corner just bumps over and takes him, then it all of a sudden you can see that it's zone coverage. So it's 2 things. It's one, it's formations, right? It gives you advantages in terms of matchups within the formation, but it's also pre-snap coverage indicators of is it man or zone based off of how they match the tight ends, how they match the backs, and things like that. How many times did we used to see with Brady, they would get a look pre-snap. They'd go 5 wide empty. And like sometimes James Devlin would like be all the way out here. And they would see that the linebacker was out there with him. And then they would know it was man coverage. So then they would throw a seam to like Julian Edelman against a linebacker because this corner is stuck on James Devlin, right? Or something like that. Or how many times would we see them get this 5 wide look? They look at it. They see the defense is in a pretty good shell against what they're throwing. And all of a sudden Brady calls everybody back in. And now we're under center against dime defense, and we're running the football because that's the look that the defense gives them. Those are the types of things that I want to see the Patriots be able to get back to. But all of it to me, and this is why it's my one big thing with the tight ends, all of it to me comes back to you can only do that if you're productive out of 12 personnel. Right. And the problem was that the reason why they used 12 personnel so few and far between, relatively speaking, with Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry, is because they weren't a good offense with the 2 of them on the field together. They were a better offense with just using 1 at a time. If they're going to max out their personnel, then it's got to be both of them together. And I think that that's going to be a huge sort of tipping point for the whole offense. And that's why it's my one big thing for tight ends. I think like getting into like Johnny Lumpkin and Scotty Washington is a little bit, that's training camp fodder for sure. But in terms of the big picture, they've got to be a 12 personnel base. They have to be able to rely on that, and that's how they can really mess with defenses and have an answer.
So you're going to hate my one big thing for wide receivers then?
Okay. Well, we'll get to it in a second.
Okay.
Let's take some of the calls. They've been waiting. All right. Sean in Vancouver, kick us off. What's up, Sean?
Hey, excuse the noise. I'm on a foot passenger ferry we call the C bus here. So you'd hear that rumbling in the background. Just got a couple of things. Evan, I want to get to what you were asking before in regards to truth serum for Robert Kraft about the payments. And just to remind listeners, we're talking about his Hall of Fame. I mean, if you're thinking about the Patriots' history, the dynasty, really a lot of people argue that it's Belichick versus Brady, but really the real answer is all three. It was Robert Kraft, Belichick, and Brady. They all contributed and they all helped each other and built that dynasty for 20 years. And that's only one of the reasons that he belongs in the Hall of Fame. But when you ask him, and here's my educated guess, about payments, about salary, about any of that, Robert Kraft defers decisions like that. When he's not the expert, he's going to bring in people that are experts. So I don't think he had any kind of limit on that. I don't think he would put his decisions. I don't think Belichick even went to him with that kind of stuff. There are people in the building that are going to make the salary decisions in terms of who they're going to put on the team, who they're going to keep, and how it's going to work around that. And that's how they built the team. The other thing I wanted to point out, as you were talking briefly about Stanley Morgan, yeah, he definitely deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. And the reason he's not is, one, well, they never won a Super Bowl, but also they were a running team in a running era. The Patriots never had a really strong passing game until I'd say till Bledsoe got there in the early 90s. I don't remember any year besides 86 that he had more than like 80 targets. Like they weren't counting targets, but the guy didn't drop the ball. Like he had like 19 average, over 19 yards per catch. It was incredible. He definitely was one of the best receivers in the history of the NFL. And now my second thing that I wanted to bring up, you were talking earlier about quarterbacks, good quarterbacks always being clutch. Well, here's one example I think that are not bad. Is Aaron Rodgers one of the top quarterbacks? I wouldn't consider him clutch, and I'll leave you guys to comment on that.
Thanks, Sean. Yeah, that's true. Aaron Rodgers is probably one of the outliers here.
Yeah.
In terms of that. And I brought up the cash spending thing because it's a hot topic right now, and I genuinely think that I said if I had some truth serum to give Robert Kraft, I would ask him, like, what's the truth behind all that, right?
Yeah.
If I could. What the bottom line is that I just think that there's a really nuanced answer to how they handle their salary cap and how they handle their payroll, quite frankly, in terms of the NFL roster, in terms of the roster, the football team, excuse me. And I just want to know, I just want to know what's like the 4D chess that they're playing with the payroll, because I know it's not as simple as Mr. Kraft sets a budget and Bill has to stick to it, and that's that. It's much more nuanced than that. And I think that they're, the talk radio fodder is about the real cash spending and all that kind of stuff. And I would love to hear an economics one-on-one course on how they handle their payroll, because they are not pumping any tires here. They are one of the best, if not the best, salary cap management teams in the NFL for 20 plus years. Yeah. So whether it's their nerds are great, their accountants are great, or whatever the case may be, they do a really good job. And I'm 100% with you on Robert Kraft getting into the Hall of Fame. 100% with you on the steamer, Stanley Morgan getting into the Hall of Fame. I mentioned they didn't throw a lot. That's probably why Stanley Morgan was the leader in yards per catch until
he's the all-time leader in yards per catch among receivers with at least 500 catches. 19.2 yards per catch. That's absurd.
That's wild, especially given the era that he played in. The fact that number, or how long ago he played, I should say, the fact that number still holds up is pretty incredible.
Yeah,
that's still the case. All right, Patty, what's up, Patty?
What's going on, guys?
Not much.
Hey.
So, real quick point before I get into my Patriots point. I call Aaron Rodgers the greatest front-running quarterback in history, because when he's got a lead, he's almost insurmountable, but especially in big games, that guy goes down by one score and he's toast. He's done. He doesn't know how to play.
He's like the Boston
Celtics. How to play the position. My Patriots point regarding Mac, Evan, not just in 12 personnel, I just think offensively they have to be better everywhere, and like I said a few weeks ago, I think Mac's going to be the breakout player, because I do think he is a smart quarterback. And I mean, we saw it the last great era with Brady and Manning, and I mean, they had great arms. They didn't have the greatest arms of all time or the best arm talent, but they were just so smart. They knew how to play the game. They knew how to manipulate defenses. And I think that with O'Brien back here on board, I think they're going to give him the freedom. Hopefully they give him the freedom to use his greatest asset, which is his brain, at the line of scrimmage to make plays, to get the defense, as you guys like to say, put them in stress, or however you articulate it. So that's where I'm coming from. That's what I want to see. And let's go, baby. I can't wait for freaking training camp.
I'm with you, Patty. I told Alex last week that I already had the itch. I don't know about everybody else. Morel, are you coasting still, or do you want football?
1 week left.
Yeah, we're all ready to go here. Trust me. I can't wait. But I think Mac, that thing was going around Twitter, Alex, about like the top 5 players on the Patriots roster. I didn't put Mac in my group of guys that were in the conversation, and I did get some pushback about that. And although I don't think that he's in that conversation currently, he's probably the one player that I would say that has the best potential to be next year, and probably needs to be, right? Certainly needs to be next year. But I like what I've seen from Max so far in the spring. Excuse me, it's obviously spring. It's early, but I like, more importantly, I like the way he's carried himself and the way that he's talked. I think that there's a lot to be said for the fact, and look, he's thrown. I know your station is a little bit more subjective to these types of things than me. He's thrown some verbal jabs potentially in press conferences, even in the spring, talking about it being normal and like stuff like that compared to last year. But for the most part, he has been quiet. He's kept his mouth kind of shut. He's worked hard. He's put his head down, and he's gotten ready for the season. He hasn't done press. He hasn't given an exclusive to somebody about how awful the Matt Patricia era was, or something like that, right? Like he hasn't done any of those types of things, and I think he has got a little bit of a chip on his shoulder. I'm just, that's all I'm gonna say about it. But I think he's got a chip. I think he hears it, and he's not.
Oh yeah, definitely.
He's not hearing it in a bratty get off my lawn type of way. I think he's hearing it and using it. He's trying to, at least.
Yeah.
He's
internalizing it, and that's the right thing to do, is as long as it doesn't cross the line. I think that's what happened last year. I think early on it was good, and then late in the season it just became too much and he crossed the line. So it's a balancing act, really. That's what it is.
Yep. All right. Let's get to Todd in North Carolina. Todd, first of all, thank you for lunch, Todd. That was clutch.
No problem. My concern has been over the last little while, and you guys have been touching on it, but nobody's actually brought it up. What is the effect, like you guys are the stat nerds, you'll get this. What is the effect on the defense's level of play based on the time of offensive possession? Because we just don't keep the ball, right? We go 3 and out. Like, are we the best team at going 3 and out? Like last year, did we have the most 3 and outs out of any other team? It just seems that our defense gets beat up by the end of the year, and this is why older players like Judon and stuff just don't have anything left in the tank. So how are we going to deal with that this year? Like, is this just going to be a total change with the new coach and system and the linemen and stuff? Because if we keep going 3 and out, I don't care who we have back there. They're not going to last.
Todd, is it? Hey, Todd, is it?
Todd.
Yeah.
Todd, that is an awesome call, Todd. Thank you.
Thank you for the call, Todd.
I have been
in for lunch. You're the man.
Evan knows. I'm surprised you didn't roll your eyes as soon as he brought that up, because you knew where I was going. How much have I been banging the table on this, going back to the 2021 season?
Yeah.
You cannot, and it was the Cowboys game, the Bucs game. Oh, the defense blew it late.
Yeah.
Well, they were getting out-snapped by 30 plays.
Yeah.
It's absolutely a factor, and it's something.
We got it. We hit the button.
There you go.
So mad.
It's something that's gone. I thought it was just me. I thought I was yelling into the void. Shout out to Todd.
No.
It's something that's
because
gone.
nobody wants to talk about it nuanced, Alex.
I know they don't. And because how dare the defense be good? And because how dare the defense be good? But and that's not to say the defense has been perfect. They've had their issues, but it all goes back to Super Bowl 51. This is the story of what happened in Super Bowl 51. The Falcons scored on quick drives. They scored on a pick six.
Yeah.
Their defense was on the field a ton through the first 3 quarters of that game, even though they had the big lead. And then late, They were gassed.
Yeah.
And that, among other things, is what opened the door for the Patriots.
And among 17 other things going the Patriots way.
It's the same thing. The same thing happened in, I forget which one it was, but the Alabama-Clemson National Championship that Hunter Renfrow caught the pass at the end.
Now you're talking like Spanish.
Alabama's defense had been on the field 35 more snaps than Clemson's defense. Okay, but it's the same thing. It happened in the Bucs game a couple years ago. It happened in the Cowboys game. I think you saw it a little bit in that Vikings game this year. Like
that Cowboys game was a big one that I remember that.
There's been so many games the last few years, and this is not like a Matt Patricia thing,
so
knocked over water bottle. This is not a Matt Patricia thing. This goes back. There's been so many games that are close, and we get to the second half. I can like see myself doing this up in the press box, and I go into the stats page, and I look at the play count.
Yeah.
How many teams does each play run? And even though it's a close game, maybe the Patriots are ahead a little bit, the other team offensively has run like 30 more plays than the Patriots because the Patriots scored on a pick six or a big play or something like that. And I'm like, here we go.
Right.
The defense is going to get gassed. That is such a great point. They need more sustained drives. And you know where this is massive, Evan? Is against Buffalo.
Yeah. I mean, that's been a huge issue against Buffalo.
Buffalo, a big part of the reason Buffalo's as successful as they are is they are a boom and bust offense that creates margin for error by how quickly they can score.
Yeah.
They're going to have bad drives, but because they can score so quickly, they know if they get 12, 13 drives a game, enough of them will be good that they'll be successful. How do you beat a team like that? Ball control and controlling the clock and limiting them to 7 or 8 drives, and then they have to be perfect. It shrinks their margin for error. I think it was the Bucs game. I forget which game it was. It might have been the Bills game. One of the games in 2021. No, I remember this. We had this conversation that my whole key to the game was you can't allow them a 9th drive. If they like their average per year, whatever
I gotta
for
admit,
the year
this
was.
This is what makes us a good team because these types of like this just I don't have an eye for it.
Well,
like
when
I'm so in the weeds on the X's and O's and the film and all that, and then Alex is like, well, what about the 9th drive? And I'm like, well,
it's funny because when we first started working together, you'd roll your eyes at this because you thought it was just nonsense, and then you see it play out.
Yeah,
I think I can't remember what game it was, but there was a game.
I remember distinctly the game that I remember off the top of my head where the defense was just absolutely gassed by the end was the Dallas game. And I remember because Mac threw the pick 6 to Trayvon Diggs,
right,
and then threw the 80-yard touchdown to Kendrick Bourne on like back-to-back plays. So the Patriots defense was just out there the whole entire game, it felt like. And then once they got into overtime and the Patriots didn't score on the first possession of overtime in the Dallas game, you knew the Cowboys, the defense just had nothing left. Like the Cowboys just walked down the field.
So here's what it was. I found it. So it was the Tampa game that year.
Yeah.
Through the first couple of games, whatever, that was week 5, right? Week 4, week 5. Through the first, however many games it had been, something like 80, close to 90% of their points came within their first 9 drives. They didn't score late in games. And I remember I said all week, you can't allow them a 10th drive.
Yeah.
You got to control the ball. 9 drives or fewer. They scored the game-winning field goal on their 10th drive.
There you go. And I think the biggest thing,
which was like a march of a drive that drained the clock because the Patriots defense just they were done.
Yeah,
they were done.
For me, like you just laid it out better than I can, so I'm not going to add too much to it.
A 15-play, 68-yard drive.
I feel like I feel like I'm on my soapbox with the Patriots defense, defending the Patriots defense a lot because, and I'm not saying this like to be snarky or
I am too, and I'm not ashamed of it.
To be pretentious or whatever. I watch a lot of football during the season. I watch a lot of other defenses. I watch a lot of other defenses film, to get ready for the next game, to preview the next game, and defenses against the Patriots offense and so on and so forth. And the Patriots defense to me is hands down consistently over the last couple of years been one of the best defenses to watch on film in the NFL. And they get this paper tiger label from a lot of people because they don't go toe-to-toe with Josh Allen and they don't shut out the Bills, or they don't, Lamar Jackson has a huge game on them, or Justin Fields in that Monday night game, which granted was a bad game. And
that was just a bad game.
I'm not letting them off the hook for it. But my general point is that I would like to see the Patriots defense and how they would look if the offense is pulling the rope in the same direction. If the offense is playing complementary football, if the offense is sustaining drives, if the offense is, breaking even on play counts and time of possession, if the offense is putting up 30 points in a game.
Yeah.
If you're telling me that the offense is holding its end of the bargain, how does the Patriots defense look then? Because when the Patriots defense gets into a game, their margin over the last couple of years, and certainly last year, was basically like, if you don't hold this offense to 20 points or under, we're losing.
Well, and that's exactly the point.
It's not fair.
As much as that stat makes me roll my eyes, everybody says, oh, the Patriots defense, they can't beat these good quarterbacks. But a lot of them, they're in the game late. You can only ask the unit to do so much.
Right.
And I'm not going to fault them. I'm not going to fault the defense for giving up a touchdown on the last drive of a game that they lose 17-14.
Right.
We had this conversation a couple years ago, Evan, on a previous show, that what an elite defense, you're never going to see the 2000 Baltimore Ravens again. You're never going to see the 2002 Tampa Bay Buccaneers again. You're never going to see the 2004 Patriots again. The definition of an elite defense in the modern age is very different. It's basically, can you give your offense enough of a chance to go punch for punch at the end every single week? Because I know that sounds like not a lot. Oh, can you just keep them in the game? There are a lot of defenses that more often than not can't even keep their team in the game, no matter how good the offense is. And that's what this defense does. They keep the offense in the game more often than not. They just can't finish it. I do want to say, so first off, I have here Super Bowl 51. The Patriots ran, I have to do math on the air.
It always comes back to 28-3. It always comes back
The Patriots ran 88 offensive plays to the Falcons 43.
Wow.
You think that's extreme?
To think that happened in a game where the Falcons once led 28-3, but that had that kind of play discrepancy.
Sorry, 41. 41.
Yeah.
88-41 was the play discrepancy in that one.
On a napkin
I was about to, but then you threw it back to me too quickly. The other one, and by the way, shout out to whoever put in the chat.
J.K. Rowling?
Shout out to whoever put in the chat correctly that.
How does he not get that?
I don't get that at all. That Alabama would have won the 2017 national championship had Bo Scarborough not broken his leg.
What?
Alabama's offense in that game ran 66 plays. Just hang on.
We're not doing Alabama.
Clemson ran 99 plays. 99
lost.
plays in a football game.
Watson beat you.
But this is the point. You can't ask your defense for much on the 99th play of the game. At that point, you failed them.
Yes.
If they're on the field for 99 plays.
What it comes down to me is, let's just see the Patriots defense through a large sample size where the offense is also doing its part. And that's the biggest thing. If you go into a game defensively and your margin of error is so razor thin that essentially you have to hold that team to like 21 points, 20 points, or you're automatically done.
Right.
Like, just imagine playing defense like that.
It's not a defense issue at that point.
All right, let's take this last call, and then we'll get back to the camp stuff. Matthew's in New Mexico. What's up, Matthew?
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Hey.
Evan, I called up on PU about the defense, but that is a good point about the offense that and I'm thinking about now. But the reason I'm calling is this is kind of how I picture, like, Bill with, like, the offense. Like, it could be like his neighbor. You know, like, Bill, like, you know, there's a lot of playmakers in the league. Like, are you guys going to hire any playmakers? And Bill is probably like, what do you mean? I signed Juju and Gesicki. You know, am I wrong?
Yeah, I guess. Are you saying that Bill is just, like, thinks that that's good enough? Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, and just, like, it goes to just what you said. Like, he's operating like we have Tom. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Yeah, it does.
So, like, he could be like, what do you mean? I got my big guys, Juju.
Yeah, no, it's how I feel about it too, Matthew. And thanks for the calls on both shows. That's my biggest thing. We had a lot of calls and a lot of talk on PU today, Alex, about Bill and his job security and all that kind of stuff. And Willem and Phillum came after me a little bit. Morel, that was interesting. We got into a little bit, but the biggest thing was, to me, is I have no issues with Bill the coach. I don't have very many issues outside of the big caveat, the big elephant in the room of Matt Patricia last year.
Yeah.
But, like, in terms of, like, what he does on a week-to-week, day-to-day basis with the football team, the game planning, the X's and O's, the playbook, right? Like, I don't have any issues with any of that stuff. I'll still take Bill Belichick over the field when it comes to his ability to coach and manage the football team in season. My biggest gripe with Bill is roster construction and roster building. And I think Matthew just made the point for me. It comes down to how do you view the quarterback position, And if you're operating under the assumption that the quarterback is going to make the whole thing go, I don't know if you have that guy yet that makes you feel comfortable with that. And when they had Brady, like if you put Brady, not 46-year-old Brady, however old he is now, but just Brady, in an offense with Juju and Gesicki and Henry and Parker and Bourne and Thornton, like I think this offense would be a top 5 offense with Tom Brady. But they don't have Tom Brady. So that means that instead of a top 5...
to be fair, what offense isn't a top 5 offense with Tom Brady?
Well, I mean, the 19 offense was...
it wasn't really Tom Brady, though.
You know what I mean, though.
Yeah, no, I do know what you mean.
I think that they have better weapons than they did in 19 now.
Oh, yeah. This is the best... this is the best assortment of offensive talent they've had since, I would even say, 17.
Yeah.
I guess for like 1 week in 19, they were loaded, right? When they had Antonio Brown and Josh Gordon. But, this should be... All right, so maybe 17's a little far back. But definitely since all of that, since the Antonio Brown drama and everything, this is the best group of skill position players they've had.
But the problem is that it's still not built up to the point where it's quarterback proof. The quarterback is still going to have to play well.
Correct.
They still need a good quarterback. And maybe my dream scenario of being I would love to be quarterback proof. Obviously, I would love to have Tom Brady again or Patrick Mahomes or insert, franchise quarterback here. But in this rebuilding process and the stage that they're in right now, my ideal is to be quarterback proof. And we've talked about this concept a lot. San
Francisco.
To be able to just have everything so buttoned up around the quarterback that if you just get adequate quarterback play, then you're going to be fine. And if you don't have one of those franchise guys, that's what you need to strive for.
Right.
That's what you need to go for. And to me, the Patriots are operating like Mac Jones is a franchise quarterback, is like this elite franchise guy where they can be okay with middling weapons, but they don't have that guy at the quarterback position. And until that philosophically changes, they basically have like 3 doors that they could walk through. Door number 1 is that Mac Jones takes that next step and becomes elite.
Yep.
Door number 2 is that they move on from Mac. Or door number 3 is that Bill changes his philosophy. And Bill goes from Juju Smith-Schuster being the highest paid receiver on the Patriots roster to trading and paying Jerry Jeudy, right? Or whatever the case may be. And if Bill is not going to walk through door number 3 with Mac Jones as the quarterback here, then I will continue to have gripes with him. But I don't have any gripes with him in terms of okay, it's Tuesday and we're game planning for the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm still taking Bill.
Yeah.
And I think that that's sort of the difference. And for some people, I get that that's a confusing, it's the same person. Even though it's 2 different jobs, GM and coach, it's the same person here. So it all falls on Bill. So if you're out on him as a GM, then you're also out on him as a coach. That's sort of how it works for a lot of people. But for me, I separate the 2 things. I don't know if he'll change. And I don't know if Mac Jones is going to be elite. And I don't know if they're going to move on. And that's how you just get stuck at 8 and 9, right? That's just how you get stuck at
they're going to have
mediocrity.
to, they're not going to extend Mac Jones if he's not good.
Right. But when I say move on, I guess is more for his 4th and his 5th year.
All right. So okay.
Short-term move on.
Yeah.
Or short-term stick with him, I guess. All right. Let's get back to the training camp stuff. We ended at tight ends. Do you have a thought on the tight ends, or did you
No, we pretty much covered it.
Wide receivers. Speak of the devil, right? Easily, I think if we added up the amount of airtime we spoke about one position on Patriots.com radio, Morel, wide receivers would be in a landslide. It's the most talked about position group on the team by a ton, an absolute ton. My big thing at wide receiver is still Tyquan. It's still Tyquan. I can't let it go. They have, as much as they have to see what they have in Mac Jones, I also think that they need to give Tyquan opportunities. And I know you're right about you can't do it at expense of the quarterback, right? If there's a better player, you got to play the better player. But I look at the way that Bill O'Brien can use Tyquan and use his speed out on the field and separate from signing DeAndre Hopkins, like that's the one caveat of like if they sign him, then obviously I don't really care about Tyquan as much. But
Right.
to me, my one big thing is that you have to make Tyquan work. At some point, you got to make one of these receivers work that you drafted. They gotta figure it out. You gotta develop them. It's not just about how they use them. It's not just about scheme and Bill O'Brien. Like, can we also develop a receiver? Like, can we make a receiver better? I think they did that with Jacoby, even though he wasn't drafted.
Yeah,
I think they did that with Jacoby. So they're capable of doing it. But I think with Jacoby, the difference was Jacoby had the drive, and he
put in a ton of work.
He put in a ton of work. Thank you. That's the best way to put it. He put in a ton of work.
Not that Tyquan isn't, but like that Jacoby grinded. That was
Jacoby had like a little Edelman in him.
Yeah.
In that respect.
Remember he followed Julian Edelman around his rookie year.
Which
he
might
lived on his hip.
Which might maybe we'll talk about this at the end. Bruce Cassidy and Milton with his cup. Gross. Anyways, that's my big thing at receiver. I also will say, well, I guess you go first because I don't want to steal yours if it's the same thing.
Well, so I'm working on two things for 98.5. They'll be up, the week before training camp. One is the 5 biggest position battles of camp, and the other is the 5 biggest stories. So I'm trying not to overlap. I have Tyquan versus Bourne as like the biggest position battle for this team.
Yeah.
Who is going to win that Z role? So that's obviously massive. But I think in a bigger picture, health.
Yeah.
Health. They need to be healthy at wide receiver. We saw in the spring how quickly it all evaporates once you lose 1 or 2 guys. And we haven't seen Juju Smith-Schuster on the field yet. We don't know exactly what kind of injury Tyquan's dealing with. Devontae Parker's a guy who is healthy right now but has a history of getting banged up.
Yeah.
They got to stay healthy. They've got to stay healthy through camp and get into the season healthy. And then maybe, once you build a little bit of rhythm offensively, it's easier if you lose a player here or there. But this group's got to stay healthy. And they didn't last year. Tyquan got hurt in, I think it was the second preseason game. Or was it the first one? He had that collarbone injury.
Second one, I think.
They have to stay healthy.
Yeah, that was where I was going to with Juju. Deuce keeps bringing this up, and I keep forgetting because in my head, I think of Juju as like earmarked for like 80 catches for 900 yards, right? Like the season he had last year for Kansas City, just because I feel like he's a known commodity. Like, I'm not saying that I don't think that his ceiling is very high, and I think his floor is very high, right? Like, I think he's going to be an 80 catch, 900 yard guy if he's out there. But I keep forgetting that he wasn't out there.
Right.
And that's a big deal. That's a big deal.
And that's more where I'm at with Tyquan than anything else, is just, can he be out? Because I don't want to say the worst thing that could happen, but what if he is really good?
Yeah.
Because we've seen this happen with guys before.
Malcolm Mitchell.
What if he is really good and then it gets to week 2 and then he gets hurt and then they've built the whole offense around him?
Well, I also kind of feel like that, not that they built the whole offense around him, but he was decent in camp last year before the collarbone injury. I don't think he was like, it wasn't like we were watching, Tyreek Hill, but like he was a good player in camp, or had some moments, I guess I should say, in camp. And then he gets the collarbone injury and the whole thing gets derailed. Look, I don't think that he would have been a good player regardless, but similar things happen with N'Keal, right? Where he gets injured early on, and it was the ankle, right, that landed him on injured reserve his rookie season, and he just never got.
He never caught up.
He never caught up. It always felt like he was taking on water from that point on, and you just hope that it's not the same for Tyquan. All right, offensive line. Got some questions in the emails from David and some other people about tackles. My big thing with the offensive line, it's to me, it's all on Adrian Clem and Bill O'Brien. You know what you have. It's a group that in the past, and in the past they had Dante Scarnecchia. I'm on record. I think he's the greatest offensive line coach of all time.
Probably the greatest positional coach of all time.
So that I understand that Stephen Neal and all these other guys, we always use Stephen Neal, right?
Poor Stephen Neal.
But all these other guys like that Dante turned
Jordan Devin,
took water and turned it into wine, was because Scar is Scar, and there is no other Scar. With that being said, they are going to have some issues at tackle this year. I don't think it's a straight line. I think it's going to be an up and down road at tackle, and I don't think that there's any real solve internal solve that's just going to make you not have to worry about tackle, and there's no external solve either because their tackles don't grow on trees and they don't get traded or moved very often if they can play. So you're going to have to coach around it. You're going to have to scheme around it. You're going to have to coach guys up. They're going to have to get back to like developing offensive linemen. Oh,
right.
Go figure, right? Like guys like, Calvin Anderson, I think is still a semi ball of clay. I know he's been in the league for a couple of years, but he's a really good athlete. He started some games, but he only has 12 starts in 3 years. I think he's got a lot of potential. Maybe they can coach him up and make him serviceable at one of the tackle spots. Trent Brown, like that's a guy you got to be on. You got to be on his case. Yeah. You got to keep him focused. You got to keep him at the right weight. You got to keep him locked in. Maybe one of these rookie guards pops. Maybe it's Antonio Maffi. Maybe it's City Sao, whether it's a tackle or it's guard, right? You got to develop some of these guys now.
It has to be a tackle. And this is, to build off your point, this is where they're at. Tackle's been their, Evan, as long as me and you have been doing shows together, tackle's been their biggest need.
Right.
And they haven't used a premium asset on a tackle, period. Not in the draft, not in free agency, nothing.
Yeah.
They have to figure out the tackle position and to sort of build on what you were saying about coaching guys up. And I just think the overall coaching of it, because there's some creativity that can be involved here too.
Yeah.
Nothing should be off the table. That means Mike Onwenu at right tackle.
That's why I brought up the rookies.
Right. So that means Mike Onwenu at right tackle. If it's Maffi on the inside or giving City Sal reps or being open to playing Trent Brown on the left or right side, being open to playing Riley Reif on the left or right side. I think everybody but McDermott pretty much is side versatile. That is the one advantage this group has is Trent Brown's a true swing tackle. Riley Reif is close. Calvin Anderson's played right tackle. I don't know that he can in their system, but
I think ideally, and this is putting a lot of eggs in Calvin Anderson's basket, so I'll put that out there. I think Calvin Anderson's a better left tackle, and
I think he is too. But they need to try everything. They need to try everything.
If I was them, I would try Calvin Anderson at left tackle with Trent at right.
That's probably their best group. But their best group is Mike Onwenu at right tackle.
Yeah, but they won't do it.
I know, but they should consider it.
They should. I think that
especially if they know they're not paying him next year.
That has to come. That comes 2 weeks in, right? Like I
hate that. You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
If they get to like Green Bay, if we're on the plane to freaking Lambeau for whatever, and it's a disaster.
Oh, 2 weeks in a camp.
Into camp.
Oh, I thought you meant into the regular season.
No, I think you have to do that way before the regular season.
It has to be. Yeah, okay. That's why I was like, I hate that because you can't start screwing
I think a
around
lot
with
of the
it,
times what happens is I think it's 10 days of camp before we get into joint practices. And they I think they use those early stages of camp to set what they think that they have.
Right.
And then we get to the joint practices, and that's when they see if it can hold up.
That's when the evaluation really begins. Yeah.
So I could see them looking at that 10-day sample and saying, you know what, we're going to go to Green Bay and we're going to kick Mike out to right tackle and we're going to put Antonio Maffi in at right guard and we're going to see how that looks against the Packers. And I think that that's a possibility. I'm with you on Onwenu 100%. I think that him playing right tackle needs to be on the table for this team. I would ideally like to keep him at guard. I think they would too. But it has to be on the table that he could potentially be a right tackle for this year. I think he's the best right tackle they have on the roster besides maybe Trent, but Trent's probably the best left tackle they have on the roster.
Right.
So he's just the best tackle they have. So wherever Trent isn't, if Trent is going to play the left side, then I think that Onwenu is your best right tackle on the roster, and you got to give it a shot.
I just think everything, who would have thought that their best 5 in 21 would involve Ted Karras? Who would have thought going into the season, especially after the rookie year Mike Onwenu had, that the best offensive line involved putting Mike Onwenu on the bench? And it took them a while to get there, but that's what it ended up being. And I'd rather them figure that out, like you said, in Green Bay or in Tennessee than, approaching Halloween. So I think it all needs to be on the table, and whatever works, it works, and you just cross your fingers and you hope it sticks.
Yeah, I'm with you on that because it's an old scarism of seeing it through the same set of eyes, and sometimes your best 5 isn't on paper your best 5.
Right.
Sometimes it's Ted Karras. It actually makes up your best 5 just because the chemistry and the timing and the rhythm of the group is better. with Ted Karras than Mike Onwenu, even though on paper, if we were doing Madden ratings, like Mike Onwenu has a higher Madden rating than Ted Karras. But once you get out there on the field, it just looks better with Ted Karras out there. So I'm with you. All hands on deck, all options on the table. I liked what I saw out of Calvin Anderson in the spring, so I'm hoping that maybe he can carry that over at left tackle with the pads come on, and maybe he is better bet at left tackle for you. He's got some athleticism. He's got some range. He can pass protect. He's fits the mold of their typical, like, more sleek, athletic, like Nate Solder style left tackle, right? I think that the power guys, they tend to be better with them on the right side than on the left side, just the way that their scheme in the run game especially works. So I would like to see Calvin Anderson there at left tackle. All right, moving over. Defensive side of the football. Turning the page. Defensive line. One big thing, I think maybe the most forgotten player on this team going into this season is Christian Barmore.
Yep.
What, like, did we just forget that Christian Barmore? And I'm saying me.
Well, no,
like,
he was.
I forgot.
I mean, he was hurt a lot of the year last year.
He was hurt a lot.
So
of the
he's
year.
kind of out of sight, out of mind. I have him too. I think the year 3 jump with him. How many? We spent a lot of time leading up last year talking about. Well, if Christian Barmore takes the leap, the defense goes from good to great, right? It adds another element to the defense. You get that interior pass rush, and I know people weren't really happy with how he was playing early in the year, but if you look beyond the box score and you actually watch the tape, like, he was an issue.
Still making an impact.
Right. He was making it. He was an issue for offense, I should say. He was making an impact. He wasn't getting sacks, but there were times where he was chasing the quarterback into sacks for Matthew Judon and things like that. And then he got hurt. And I think he missed like 2 months. He missed a while.
A long time.
And I don't think he was fully healthy when he got back. Just that's not like inside information, just watching him. He didn't look as explosive as he normally looks. Here we go. He's fully healthy, year 3. Can he make that jump? I will say, though, if he doesn't make it this year, I think then he just is who he is.
He's just a
which is still a good player, but
you look at it,
and this is for everything we've talked about with Mac Jones and the 5th-year option.
It's not that all that different. It's not.
Well, for Barmore, there is no 5th-year option. This is it.
3 and 4.
Right, he's up for the extension this time next year. So
it's not that all that different. It's just we got there very differently. Like, Mac had the coaching issues and all that kind of stuff last year, and Barmore had injuries. But there are 2 players that we expected to make a year 2 leap that has now unfortunately become a year 3 leap, right? And I still think that potential is there for Christian Barmore, and I still think that he has the ability to do it. And if he becomes a true interior game wrecker for you, and now you have Barmore coming up the middle, and you have Judon and Uche and Keon White potentially mixing in now too on the edges and getting after quarterbacks, that's really, really deep. It's a good group. I mean, it's a good defensive line. I think he's one of those guys that, when I did my top 5 Patriot list, I was like, well, in reality, like, if I'm just going off of pure talent, then Christian Barmore probably is pretty close to this top 5. Like, just who's the best physical football player on this team? Christian Barmore is in that conversation, I think. And maybe not the top of the conversation. I still think Judon is in his kind of a class of his own, to be honest. And maybe Kyle Duggar belongs in that ballpark or that tier. But I think Christian Barmore is in that mix as well. So we're in agreement on defensive line that it's Christian Barmore. I think that he doesn't get talked about enough with this team taking that next step, because they do have some of the younger defenders, Gonzalez, Amapu, White, and he kind of gets lost a little bit. I think it's important at edge, or outside linebacker, edge. I'm going to say edge just to grind your gears. Edge, it's a big thing with Josh Uche. I think it's a big thing that we touch on. His season last year was interesting. There is some regressing to the mean potential there, and there's also the potential that he's just really good, right? So either way, what can Josh Uche do to earn a second contract in Bill Belichick's eyes? Because to me, racking up 8 sacks in the second half of the year, all of his sacks last year came
11?
Or 11, excuse me. I mean, last 8 weeks of the year, 11 sacks last 8 weeks. All of his sacks last year came in the second half of the season.
Well, it's right. I mean, it's right there. It's consistency. And I think you talk about the second contract, it's a little bit of a fallacy. Or a Catch-22. It's the name of the show. I don't think that that's something that's one of 2 things is going to happen. Either He proves the end of last year was, I don't want to say a fluke because he played well, but
right.
He proves that it wasn't sustainable.
Yeah.
He goes back to the player he was the first 2.5 years of his career. And at that point, I mean, you can extend him, but he's kind of a replacement level player.
Right.
Or he proves that the second half of last year is the player he really is, in which case he's going to be. That's more than he was averaging more than a sack per game. He probably becomes one of the top 5 free agents in the market, and the Patriots aren't going to pay him.
How sad is it that him actually regressing back to the mean is the way that he gets retained by the Patriots?
I don't think he gets retained either way.
That's sad.
Well, I guess he gets retained if it's somewhere in the middle, but
yeah.
Think about it. If you're Josh Uche, why would you sign an extension right now? You're probably going to bet on what you did in the second half last year.
Absolutely.
And if you're the Patriots, why would you sign an extension right now? Because the guy hasn't been consistent. You have an 8-game sample size over 3 years to work with. So he's going to go. He's going to go into the season and play. And it's just, either he was the guy. He's one of two players. This is essentially kind of what we're doing with Mac Jones, but on a different scale. 2 sacks through his first, I think it's like 25 games, and then 11 in his last 8.
Yeah.
Which guy is he? Either guy, I don't think the Patriots pay. They want consistent middle, I don't want to say middle of the road pass rushers, but they want consistent guys.
Yeah.
They want pass rushers who bring consistency. And if there's one thing, I think Josh Uche is a pretty good player, but he's not consistent. You can't sit here and say he's consistent, and that's what the Patriots want from that position.
Yeah, and you look at, I'm just pulling this up real quick. You look at sort of comps of what Josh Uche could get paid on the open market. And the contract that I look at as a decent comp, and I think the one thing that you have to throw out there is that, and I said this on Twitter, and people were like, "Oh yeah, my wife is, if my uncle had what, it would be he'd be my aunt or something like that or whatever."
My uncle had wheels, he'd be a wagon.
Yeah, there you go. Whatever that saying is, but in a different defensive system, I truly believe Josh Uche would play more. I think
there's some of that, because let me just real quick, because I feel like I kind of just dumped on him a little bit. He's not, it's a little Chandler Jones-ish with him, whereas I remember they let Chandler Jones walk, and he almost set the NFL record for sacks in a season.
Chandler Jones is the one guy that maybe it wouldn't have worked out as well here, but that's the one guy that I would have gone back and paid. If you had to pick.
He's not, whatever it was like 21 sacks he had that year. He's not getting 21 sacks here because that's not how they play defense.
Right.
I don't think Josh Uche is going to go be a 20-sack player somewhere, but I think there is some of that where he's at his best when he can pin his ears back and go, and that's really not something they've ever done. They've started doing it just for Matthew, but because of Matthew Judon. Yeah. They do it for Judon because Judon's that good.
And they pay him.
Unless Uche's because Judon's got, I think, 2 more years. He's signed through 25.
And he's getting up there. He's like 31.
Unless Uche's the replacement for Judon, that's not how they That's not how they generally
and
have
I think
their
we're
pass
saying the
rushers
same
play.
thing. Like, Uche played 40% of the snaps last year, roughly, right? I think it was like 38 or 39%.
Yeah.
I think in another defense, he's like a 60% snap guy because he plays a little bit more on first and second down. Right. Because he's not going to play first and second down here just because of all the stylistic reasons that you laid out. So back to the comp. The comp that I would say for Josh Uche that I could think of is Hassan Reddick with the Eagles, who I think is a similar smaller edge guy, but has that explosive gear, that get off, that ability to rush the quarterback. Yeah. Reddick has been better against the run, but he's also had more opportunities to be better against the run.
Right.
So he got a 3-year, $45 million deal with the Eagles last year. So $15 million per on a total value basis. It was a $14.2 million signing bonus, $30 million in guaranteed money. So basically a 2-year, $30 million deal with the team option for the 3rd season. That's basically what he got.
Okay.
So I think if I'm Josh Uche's agent, that's sort of a starting point, or that's sort of what my goal is, I guess I should say. Would be something along the same lines in terms of APY. I don't know how they structure it and all that nuanced stuff. In terms of APY, I don't think the Patriots are coming close to paying $15 million a year for Josh Uche, which means that he's probably out of here anyways. But I really I think he's a good pass rusher. I think he's in his bag. I think he's got like 17 different moves.
He's a good pass rusher, but it's just not. They have one spot for that here, and the guy doing it does a pretty good job at doing it, and he's still under contract for a while.
That's fair.
In Judon.
I'd still pay him. especially with the cap space that he have next year, I would pay him. I understand they have their reasons and they make sense. Like, if you are going to live in a world, and I'm not necessarily saying it's right or wrong, but if you're going to live in a world where Jelani Tavai is still getting first down snaps over the guy you're paying $15 million a year to, you just can't do it. Right. You can't have that happen. And that's why I said, brought it up as my one big thing at edge, because I don't know what the world is that Josh Uche gets a second contract with the Patriots. And it's one of those things where it's a little bit tricky, because you mentioned Chandler Jones, not a bad comparison, especially because they play the same position. He is deserving. If he has another good year, I should say.
Oh, yeah.
He's deserving of it.
Yeah.
But it just doesn't necessarily make sense with the way that they play defense, right?
Right.
It's a tricky one. I would also just mention quickly at edge, the other big thing behind.
Well, look, so they let Chandler Jones walk,
Yeah.
and then they had already drafted, but they moved Trey Flowers into a bigger role,
Yeah.
who was a much better fit for what they want from that position. So you could see, the guy Keon White, is actually, and that was my con for him, was Trey Flowers. Like,
right.
I was going to say Ronnie Perkins, but I don't think he's going to be here. But no, Keon White's, So you let Uche walk, you don't pay him. Keon White's probably going to play that role more the way they want to play it. You already have him in the building. You go take that $15 million. I'd say go spend it on a receiver. Who knows how they'll spend it.
on 17 different players.
Exactly.
Yeah. But Keon White's the guy. That was my other sort of spin-off of that, is behind Judon and Uche, there's not a whole lot of proven edge guys
Anthony
there.
Jennings.
Anthony Jennings, I'm not forgetting about him this time.
You just did.
But do you think he's proven talent? Like, do you think he's a proven commodity?
I think he's played
He's a backup.
significant NFL snaps.
Okay.
And he's held his own in playing significant NFL. Like, proven as what?
I guess my point is like,
as a third edge guy, I feel very comfortable with him there.
I'm going to use the old Dave Damachek, like, Jenga analogy.
Yeah.
If you pull Matthew Judon out of the Jenga tower, who has a big enough piece to make sure the whole thing doesn't come tumbling down?
You know what? I would say on a different...
Because it's not Anthony Jennings.
But on a different scale, if you pull Anthony Jennings out, now who's after him?
I think...
He's the buffer. He's the buffer.
You like Anthony Jennings.
I do. I think he's a good player.
Okay.
I think he's a
fine.
good rotational third edge guy.
So you're...
And that's the role he's going to be in.
All right,
so
then if that's the case, then they don't have depth issues at that position.
Well, behind him, they have nobody, and that's a position that gets banged up.
Then it probably becomes like a smorgasbord of like Jelani Tavai and Keon White and like a couple different guys.
It would be really nice to see if Ronnie Perkins can even turn into a guy that like they can elevate from the practice squad.
That's sad. But that's what we're talking about, because I liked Ronnie Perkins coming out. I thought he had potential.
I did too.
All right. Off-ball linebackers, inside linebackers. You know where I'm going with this.
I am. Same
come
thing
on,
again.
Like,
too many of these have been the same. This is a little weird.
It's the prodigal son of the Patriots defense. It's my prodigal son, I should say. It's Marty Mapu.
Is this team that predictable, or have we just been spending way too much time together?
I think it's the fact that we've basically done this show in like a different way for like 6 straight weeks.
Plus all the times we've done it via text message.
Yeah, like this is when you know that camp needs to get here. It's Marty Mapu. It's not only him as a player, it's how they use him.
Yeah.
It's if they're willing to use him the way that we want them to use him, which is at linebacker, not at safety, and not at like Kyle Duggar safety. Like, no, I want him playing linebacker, inside linebacker. And next to Juwan Bentley, who I think is going to be rock solid for you again this year with Bentley. And Mapu, to me, has a lot of potential. I think that he's might be the missing ingredient to solving some of these mobile quarterbacks. He might be a Josh Allen killer. And if
he's as close as they've had.
If that's what he ends up being, then watch out with this defense. I think this defense, that to me is the biggest X factor. I think a lot of people make Christian Gonzalez the biggest X factor. I kind of know or feel like I know what they're going to get out of Gonzalez this year. I'm not saying it's going to be perfect. I think there's going to be ups and downs to it, certainly. But I think that with Gonzalez, you know that you're probably going to have a starting outside corner on a rookie, like kind of like Devin McCourty, his rookie year, right? Like it might not be perfect, but he's going to be able to hold down the position and play it at a pretty good level. Marty Mapu is the X factor. He's the swing guy. If he is is a force like we think he might be able to be, I think that their defense just got a whole lot better in terms of the upside of the defense, especially against mobile quarterbacks. And they once again, not all of them are like super mobile, but Jalen Hurts is on the schedule, Josh Allen's on the schedule, Mahomes is on the schedule, Herbert's on the schedule. And then in Miami, they still run a lot of RPO option looks with Tua, even though he's not truly mobile. They still run a lot of that stuff. So solving these like college spread offenses and these athletic quarterbacks playing the position, it's Marty Mapu. He's maybe one of the biggest things out of all the big things.
I kind of narrowed in on it a little bit. Just what does he look like in fully padded practices?
Yeah.
I feel like from the spring we got a good idea about his athleticism, his instincts, his football IQ, all that, and they all check the boxes. Like there's a reason we were raving about him, but he's still 6'3", 217, and that's not big for a Patriots linebacker. When he's got to take on a guard in the A gap, what is that going to look like? That is the biggest question.
I really just hope.
All right, let me rephrase that. That was.
I hope I know what you mean.
That old no, because I missed that old phrase came back, but like they shouldn't ask him to do that. That's why Bentley's here. Let me rephrase that. What happens when he has to tackle a 220-pound running back in space?
Yeah, sure.
Or a 240-pound quarterback in space? Maybe in I don't think Malik Willis is that big, but Malik Willis or Will Levis when they get to that Tennessee game, or even Ryan Tannehill. Like, these are bigger guys.
Yeah.
What happens when he's one-on-one with that quarterback? Can he chase him down? Can he bring him down? When it's tight ends over the middle, things like that. Like, I just need to see him in contact because that's the last box he hasn't checked. He shouldn't be shooting the A gap. I regret I said that. That's why Bentley's here. You even said he's playing next to Bentley. Yeah. Bentley's going to run downhill, and Marte Mapu's going to handle your east to west.
Correct.
But I want to see him basically just physically take on bigger players.
You got the hammer and you got the chaser, right? Like that's
float like a butterfly, sting like a bee.
Right, there you go. That's what you need with Marty Mapu.
But the butterfly's got to have a little bit of bite.
All right, let's move on to safeties, because I think linebacker and safety in this defense is pretty. There's some overlap there.
We already did a tight end before wide receivers, so just throwing the whole order out.
Is there an order?
Yeah.
What do you mean? Yeah.
The Madden order: quarterback, running back, receiver, tight end, O-line, D-line, linebacker, corner, safety, specialist.
Your order is based off of Madden.
Everybody's order is based off of Madden.
Well, they're showing the John Madden football life on the TV.
Or it's also the order that the fantasy football stuff is in, and it's I don't know where it started.
We're going to safeties.
That has always quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, tackle, guard, center, defensive tackle, defensive end, inside linebacker, outside linebacker, corner, free safety, strong safety, kicker, punter, third down, running back.
We're going to safeties because there's overlap with linebackers.
No, I'm saying we already threw out the order, so just go for it.
My one big thing at safety, you know what? I'm going to allow you to go to first because I keep stealing your one big thing, so I'm going to be generous, and I'm going to allow you to go first.
I'm going to kind of pick up where I left off in the spring, which is, like, how are the deep safety reps getting split up? It's clear that it's going to be by committee. We saw that in the spring, and we saw certain guys more than others. Jabril Peppers played a pretty big role, I thought. You saw Kyle Duggar back there a bunch. Yeah. Adrian Phillips a little bit, but, this is more of a joint practice thing. I don't know how much of this we'll see early on, but, Green Bay, Tennessee, 2-minute drill, ones-on-ones. Who's back? Who's deep? Is it one? Is it two? Is it Is it rotation? Is Jonathan Jones back there? Just all of it. Ed's kind of cut into that. I got asked on my mailbag this week on 985thesportshub.com who is my surprise, potential breakout player for the Patriots this year on defense. I have Jabril Peppers.
Yeah.
I think last year he was coming off torn ACL. He was in a new system.
And he was pretty good last year.
And, remember, it took a while.
Yeah.
It wasn't the second half he started to come on. Now he's healthy. He's got a full year in the system. He hit his stride late in the year. He's going to beat it seems like the whole thing for the safeties this year, just overall, is versatility. The way they're going to make the most out of the safety position is putting guys in different spots and mixing and matching.
Yeah.
And no player is better suited for that than Jabril Peppers.
Yeah.
So I don't know that he's going to be like their starting deep safety. I don't even know that he's going to be their most used safety.
He's such one of those guys that it's kind. And I know that this is different because it started here and ended here, but it's like Patrick Chung, where Bill's just the right coach to figure out how to use him.
Exactly.
And early on in his career, he goes to Cleveland. He's like this. He's the Heisman runner-up or in college.
Yeah.
And he's got all this
and they didn't use him right at all.
Right. And it it takes a coach like Bill who is so good at taking guys that are tweeners and these like outside the box players and putting them into a box.
It's funny. Joe Judge kind of figured, or I forget who the DC was under Judge, but
I think it was Patrick Graham, who is a
Patriots guy. Yeah, he's in Vegas now, right?
Yeah.
He's working for McDaniels. He kind of figured it out in New York, and then he tore his ACL.
Right.
He had a really good year in 21, or no, he had a really good year in 20, and then tore his ACL in 21, and then came here. So he's still young. People don't realize how young he's still young. Like I am really excited for what Jabril Peppers is going to do this year. I think he could be like I don't know that he's going to be their most used safety. I think Duggar's going to play more. I think Phillips is going to play more. But like third down, got to have it downs. I think they're going to put Jabril Peppers on the field in a spot to make a play, and I think he's going to make some plays.
All right, I like that. I think since it's a big thing, I'm thinking more big picture as well. I still think we talked about Jenga.
Yeah.
I still think how they replace the leadership lost by Devin McCourty is maybe the biggest Jenga piece.
I guess I didn't think of that because it's weird because that's like McCourty. We're doing this by position. McCourty's a safety, but I think that honestly comes from linebacker and corner.
It just feels like they need to figure out a communication process early on in camp, and they need to stick with it, and guys need to take on that responsibility.
See, that's a big part of the reason I want John Jones at safety.
They can't just force that on somebody.
Yeah.
Like if you're not built for it and it's not a responsibility you want to take on, you can't just be thrown into it.
Well, look, Bentley is probably going to do some of it.
Bentley will quarterback the front seven. That's not a problem.
I still think John Jones is the guy. Now, if he's playing boundary corner, that's really hard for him to do.
Yeah, he could probably do it a little bit more from nickel, but
right.
I think the biggest thing is like when you're back there, you just see it, right? Like you see the whole formation and you can kind of scan it and see. It's like a quarterback, right?
Yeah.
You can sit back there and kind of figure out where everything is coming from.
So maybe that's Phillips?
He's
a smart guy.
When we were listening to Belichick talk at Devin McCourty's retirement press conference, and he was talking about that AFC Championship game against Kansas City, and all of the different checks and all the different calls that Devin made in that game to make sure that they had Tyreek Hill covered.
On lock, yeah.
And that's going to happen again this year. Obviously, it's going to happen literally with the same player twice this year with Tyreek Hill. But in general, it's going to happen, and they're going to have to be able to figure it out. I think the one thing, and I always give Bill credit for this, the one thing that makes their defense so great is they don't beat themselves defensively. They are structurally sound. They are terrifically structurally sound. I know some places that track it, it's a little bit subjective of how they track it, but like in terms of like busted coverage rate, the Patriots are always near the top of the league in how good they are at not doing that, right? Like they don't just let guys run through. They don't just lose guys like 20 yards behind the defense. Like that type of thing just doesn't happen here. I'm not saying they don't get beat, but they get beat because it's just man on man and they get beat, right? But they don't beat themselves. They're not, they don't play cover 3 and they don't have a hook, right? And you're looking around and you're like, who's the hook, right? Like that stuff doesn't happen with the Pats. And a lot of that was because they basically had a defensive coordinator on the field in the back end at safety.
Right. A lot of that was Devin McCourty.
And it's going to be a big deal for them. It's going to be a big deal. All right, let's move over to corners. One big thing at corner, I thought about going Christian Gonzalez here. I
had Christian Gonzalez.
It's low hanging fruit. I'll let you take that one.
I mean, just live reps. Like, how does he look in live reps? That's what we all want to see.
Yeah, pads on, physicality, right? Like, how does he take that on as a more slender guy? The one thing that I think that the nickel position, I'm trying to think how I want to phrase this exactly. I think the nickel position needs to be upgraded from Miles Bryant. And I hate picking directly on Miles Bryant all the time.
Well, in theory, they have two better options than Jonathan Jones and Marcus Jones, who they didn't have last year. Now, some of that goes to Jack Jones and Jalen Mills, but one of those two guys should be able, assuming everybody's healthy, one of those two guys should be able to play in there. This goes back to something Evan and I talked about a lot last week. I'd still like to see them add a veteran boundary corner, like a true third veteran boundary corner, even if it's just Terrence Mitchell coming back, just so you don't end up in a spot this year where you're having to play both Jonathan Jones and Marcus Jones on the boundary regularly.
Correct. But I hear you, I guess. Christian Gonzalez is on one side. Jonathan Jones is on the other side for now, right? We're assuming that Jack Jones is not available.
Right.
Isn't Jalen Mills that guy?
Unless they're just going to play him at safety. It seems pretty clear that Jalen Mills is just a safety now. So, yeah, to be fair, moving Jalen Mills back to corner could be that thing, but
I think
it's like the Michael
Mills,
Onwenu thing. I think they're just done with that.
I think Jalen Mills, for them this year, I think they were done with it before Jack Jones situation
that's
happened.
fair. That's fair.
Post Jack Jones situation, and I don't want to get too much into the Jack Jones thing.
Yeah.
But post Jack Jones situation, I think Jalen Mills he's a fire extinguisher. He puts out fires now. If in some game plans he's better at safety, he's going to play safety. In some game plans he's better at corner, he's going to play corner. And when I say better, I mean more useful
for the matchup. Yeah.
So when they play Cincinnati, instead of having to run Jonathan Jones against T. Higgins, now maybe Jalen Mills plays corner that game and Jonathan Jones goes back into the middle of the field for the day.
Right.
If they're playing a match against Miami, maybe Miami is a matchup where Jalen Mills plays more safety because they have smaller receivers and they don't necessarily need Jalen Mills to play on the outside. I think Jalen Mills now goes and puts fires out.
I like that.
And I think that's a really valuable
the plan,
role.
Great.
I think it's a really, really valuable role. I think that's like one of the things I'm more excited about with this defense is that they have that they have somebody they can move around like that. I wouldn't call him quite like a queen on the chessboard, maybe like a knight or a rook, right? Like a secondary piece.
It's like what to cross sports for a second, what Brock Holt was in his prime with the Red Sox.
It's a utility
left
man.
Fielder needs a day off. All right, Brock, you're playing left field.
Right.
Second baseman needs a day off. Brock, you're playing second. Like it's just wherever you need him, you can just put him there. I hope that's the case.
Yeah.
Because then you don't need that other boundary corner, and you save one of John Jones or Marcus Jones to play in the slot. And Miles Bryant, I've said this before, I don't think Miles Bryant would be a bad third safety, fourth safety, whatever, like extra safety.
Yeah.
That's probably a better role than him. We don't need to see him in man coverage anymore.
Yeah, agreed. That's a big thing.
Yeah.
You got to get him out of man coverage. You got to. All right. Specialists, your time to shine.
So, like I said, I'm breaking my preview up into two parts. There's the position battle part.
It's 17,000 words, so it needs to be broken up into two
parts. Well, no,
it's
two different things. It's the position battles and then everything else to watch. So, obviously position battle, punter, right, is a big one. But for the what to watch for the special teams, I'm actually curious just how they handle kickoffs. We didn't see a ton of kickoff work in the spring. It's a new rule. And kickoff returns, too, like all of it.
So do you mean like from a technical standpoint, or you mean like let's not have Nyheim Hines happen again?
All of it. Like, how are they adjusting to the new rule?
Yeah.
There's, they invested in special teams in the offseason. They brought in Chris Board. They kind of overhauled that position. Just what does the kickoff unit look like? What does the return unit look like? Are they going to allow teams to return kicks? Or are they going to just try to go for touchbacks? Are they going to maybe put some emphasis on returning kicks? Are they going to draw some stuff up? Are they going to line up any differently? Like, I'm just curious how they're going to adapt. I'm curious how they're going to adapt to the new rules in that phase of the game.
Yeah, I think we're on the same lines because I'm on a coaching line too, and I think that's more coaching. But I look at the way this team is constructed, and I don't necessarily need them to win games in the kicking game. Like, it's obviously gravy if you have Marcus Jones return a punt for a touchdown in a game, or you block a punt, or whatever the case may be. But they are not going to make the playoffs again this year. They're not going to get back to the playoffs if they're losing games because of special teams. And when I say losing games, maybe that's a little strong, but if special teams is working against them, they're going to have a lot of trouble, I think.
Yeah.
And they are going to have to be a clean football team again. And this is part of the reason why Bill O'Brien's back, is to not necessarily because they need to, change philosophies to score 40 points a game, or like, it's not that deep. It's simply just they need to be cleaner on offense. They need to be a more well-oiled machine. I think special teams is the same way. They need to be cleaner. They can't be running into the punter on 4th and 3 anymore.
Right.
They can't be giving up 2 kickoff return touchdowns in a must-win, basically playoff game in Week 18 of the season in Buffalo. We can go down the line with all the things that happened last year. That needs to change. And in the spring, Alex, we saw a lot of Joe Judge on special teams. It almost felt like
almost exclusively
he was the special teams coordinator.
Yeah.
Even though he's not listed as a special teams coordinator. That is what it feels like. And if that's the answer, then that's the answer. But this, to me, is the biggest risk that Bill Belichick is taking with this team again this year, is he's counting on Joe Judge to do something again, right?
Yeah.
He's counting on Joe Judge to clean up special teams. And if special teams are a disaster again, all those calls that we didn't get as many of them on this show, they know not to call us about the drama. They leave that for Patriots Unfiltered. But all the calls that we got earlier today on PU about Belichick's future and about his status as a coach here with the Patriots. If they lose a must-win game again like they did last year against Buffalo because of kickoff returns and it's Joe Judge's fault, it's just another bullet in the old ammo chamber, right? Like we'll
start getting the friends of Bill talk again.
Right. And I also wonder, and I like Cam McCord. We like Cam McCord, just getting to know him a little bit, covering the team.
Yeah.
I wonder what Cam McCord's role is, what his thoughts are on all this, how he handles it. And it has a trickle-down effect, too, because they have 3 coaches now coaching special teams, by the way, because Joe Houston's still in the building. And Joe Houston was the assistant special teams coach last year, and Cam McCord was the special teams coordinator. Now Joe Houston's basically like the assistant to the assistant special teams coach.
Right.
Right? It's the old Dwight Schrute. So at what point, how does that affect the dynamic, and how does it affect it all? They need to be better in the kicking game. They need to get back to... In 21, they were really good in the kicking game. Obviously, in 20, I think that was probably their best year under Accord. That was the year that Gunner gets All-Pro nods as a returner. Bailey was an All-Pro punter that year. They won games on special teams, had big plays in games on special teams, I should say. This team's going to need it. They're going to need those points. They're going to need the hidden yards. They're going to need the occasional blocked punt. They're going to need the occasional field flipping return. They're going to need to cover kicks well, and that's how they win. That's how they're going to win. Playoff amount of games. That's how they're going to win 10, 11 games. Is if they do that. So that's a big deal with the special teams. I think that about does it here. Like I said at the beginning of the show, Alex and I are going to record right after this, and you guys are going to hear it next week. A FAQ, as Fred called it, of Patriots training camp. We're going to get into the weeds a little bit about how we watch camp and that type of stuff. We'll also have some fun with it and give some suggestions of, lunch spots and that type of thing. But it's a Patriots Catch-22 FAQ on training camp. But don't call in next Thursday. All right. Don't call in. Don't email in. It's not going to be live. We're live to tape. Yeah. So keep that in mind, and I will be on vacation, and hopefully Jess isn't listening to this, but if DeAndre Hopkins signed, we might have to do an emergency pod. So we'll think about that when the time comes. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it, all right? But until then, make sure you still listen to next week's show. We will have something for you in my stead, we promise. But until then, signing off. For Alex Barth, I'm Evan Lazar. Thanks for watching on YouTube. Thanks for listening. And we'll speak to you guys next week. Bye.
Thank you for downloading this podcast. Subscribe on Apple, Google Play, and everywhere else you listen. Like the show? Please rate and review us. Listener comments and ratings help keep us high in the podcast rankings so new listeners can find us. Be sure to check patriots.com for more news and more podcasts.